Ladies and gentlemen, ever notice how the most powerful advice, the kind that actually changes your life, isn't the kind people shout from the rooftops? It's the kind that comes in whispers. The stuff no one really talks about until life forces you to learn it the hard way. When life hits you with pain, the first question we ask is, what did I do wrong? That's how most of us were conditioned. If something hurts, if it breaks us down, if it makes us cry at night or question our worth, it must be a sign we messed up somewhere. But not all pain is punishment. Some of it is preparation. We don't always realize it in the moment. In fact, it rarely feels like growth when you're in it. It feels like loss. It feels like confusion. It feels like betrayal. But underneath all that, there's a process unfolding. Pain isn't always the consequence of a mistake. It's often the soil where God plants resilience, faith, and wisdom. In the Bible, we are said that gold is refined in fire, not in comfort, not in applause, in fire. Think about that. That means the most valuable version of you, the strongest version of you, doesn't come from ease. It comes from intensity, from pressure, from moments where you're unsure you'll even make it through, but you do. That's not punishment, that's refinement. Look at Joseph, betrayed by his brothers, thrown in a pit, sold into slavery, forgotten in prison, years of what looked like pure suffering. If anyone had a reason to ask God, why are you punishing me? It was him. But what was actually happening? God was preparing him to rule, to lead, to carry influence with humility and discernment. The pain wasn't to destroy him, it was to shape him. It was to build the kind of man who could carry power without losing integrity. In the Bible, we are said that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope. But no one talks about that part when you're right in the middle of it. People will look at your struggle and assume it's evidence of failure. But God often uses the wilderness to get you ready for the promise. Not because you're unworthy, but because you're worth preparing. The pain isn't always about the now, sometimes it's about the next. What you're walking through today might be the exact preparation for what you're called to handle tomorrow. And if you skip the process, you miss the strength. If you rush the healing, you compromise the lesson. Jesus himself didn't avoid pain, he walked through it. He wept, he sweat blood, he carried a cross. He didn't deserve, but that pain led to purpose that would change everything. That wasn't punishment, it was sacrifice. It was destiny unfolding in a way that didn't look pretty, but held power no one could see at first. So when it hurts, before you question your worth, before you assume God's angry at you, pause. Ask instead, what is this shaping in me? Because some of the most painful seasons are where purpose is being carved out. Quietly, deeply, intentionally. Letting go of someone you care about isn't hard because you're weak. It's hard because your heart is involved. It's tied up in memories, in hope, in potential. It's not the leaving that hurts the most. It's the thought that maybe, if you held on just a little longer, something would finally change. But the truth no one tells you is that the hardest people to walk away from are often the exact ones delaying your breakthrough. Some relationships are rooted in comfort, not calling. Just because someone feels familiar doesn't mean they're meant to stay. There are people who enter your life for a season, and if you try to drag them into your next chapter, all you do is carry weight that wasn't meant to come with you. In the Bible, we are said to lay aside every weight and the sin that so easily entangles. Not everything that's holding you back is evil. Sometimes it's just heavy. Sometimes it's just misaligned. And sometimes the reason you feel stuck isn't because you lack faith. It's because you're refusing to let go. Abraham had to separate from Lot before God showed him the fullness of his promise. God didn't give him the full vision until the separation happened. That tells you something. Some revelations are waiting on your release. Some clarity won't show up until you walk away from what's been clouding your view. And no matter how loyal you've been, there comes a moment where staying too long starts to cost you more than leaving ever would. It's not about being cruel, it's about being clear. Clear about your future, clear about your identity, clear about the fact that who you're becoming cannot coexist with who you were when you settled. When God starts stirring you, stretching you, pushing you to grow, it will always challenge your relationships. because growth demands space, and not everyone wants to make room for the version of you that refuses to stay small. In the Bible, we are said that bad company corrupts good character. That doesn't always mean people are toxic. Sometimes it just means they're not growing. And being surrounded by people who refuse to evolve will quietly convince you to shrink. You'll start ignoring what you were created for just to keep peace with people who were never meant to walk in your purpose with you. Jesus didn't beg anyone to stay. He loved deeply, but he also walked away from places where there was no belief. He sent people out 2 by 2, knowing some connections had an expiration date. And even he had a Judas at the table, because proximity doesn't equal alignment. There will be people you love who can't go where you're going. People who held your hand in one season but would only hold you back in the next. And you'll feel the tension between loyalty and legacy, between love and leadership, between history and destiny. Letting go won't feel fair, it won't feel easy, but it will set you free. There's this myth we've all bought into, the idea that we can't move on until we get closure, until someone gives us a final explanation, until we understand why they left, why they changed, why they broke what you tried so hard to hold together. But closure is often just another word for control. We want to make sense of something that never will. We think if we get that one last conversation, it'll somehow ease the ache, silence the questions, settle the storm. But you don't need closure to move forward. What you really need is clarity. Clarity doesn't come from them, it comes from within, from God, from the still moments where you realize that you don't have to wait for someone else's words to give you permission to heal. Sometimes the door closes and you'll never know why. They ghost you, they change, they forget what they promised, and you're left standing there with all your what-ifs and unanswered texts and tangled memories, trying to figure out if it was you. But in the Bible, we are said to guard our hearts, because everything we do flows from it. You're not required to reopen wounds just to understand them. You're called to protect your peace, not chase explanations. Look at Jesus. He didn't chase after people who walked away. He didn't hold town hall meetings to get closure from every Pharisee that misunderstood him. He stayed focused on his mission. He let people leave. He let silence speak. And even when the crowd that praised him one day shouted, "Crucify the next," he didn't pause to make it make sense. He moved forward with clarity. We think healing requires answers, but more often it requires surrender. The willingness to say, I don't know why they did what they did, but I know who I am, and I know where God is taking me. That's clarity. It's knowing that your future isn't being held hostage by the apology you never received. It's knowing that peace is something God gives, not something another person grants you. In the Bible, we are said to forget what is behind and press forward toward what lies ahead. You can't press forward if you're still sitting by the door waiting for someone to come back and make it right. Sometimes you get clarity when you finally admit the truth you didn't want to face, that the situation isn't coming back together. But that doesn't mean you won't. You grow when you stop asking why it ended and start asking what it taught you, what it revealed about you, what it awakened in you. There are some closures that won't ever come in words. They come in wisdom, in seeing the patterns, in realizing what you'll no longer tolerate, in understanding what you deserve. So you release the need for their version of closure. You give yourself the clarity that you were created for more than confusion. You were built to keep walking. And you don't need their reasons to start healing. We live in a culture that equates waiting with wasting. If it's not happening now, we assume it's not happening at all. And that pressure, that sense of urgency can convince us that any delay means we've missed our shot. But sometimes the delay isn't punishment or failure. Sometimes the delay is God's design to protect your destiny. We think we're ready for things just because we want them badly. We pray for the relationship, the opportunity, the platform, the promise. And we assume the moment we desire it, we're prepared for it. But desire and readiness aren't the same. Just because you're hungry doesn't mean you're ready to digest what's coming. And in the Bible, we are said that there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. That means even good things can be dangerous if they arrive outside their appointed season. You might think God is saying no when he's really saying not yet. And that not yet isn't punishment, it's protection, because he sees the parts of the picture you can't, the hidden motives, the timing, the preparation that still needs to happen inside of you and around you. The delay could be keeping you from entering something that would damage your faith, confuse your identity, or sabotage your purpose. The Israelites were led the long way around the desert, not because God couldn't take them through the shorter route, but because he knew what was waiting on that road. In the Bible, we are said that if they had faced war too soon, they might have changed their minds and gone back to Egypt. And God wasn't just trying to get them to a destination. He was trying to get Egypt out of them. He was trying to shape their character before giving them the promise. And maybe that's you right now. Maybe the silence, the pause, the delay you're feeling is actually God keeping you safe from something you don't even know you're not ready for. Maybe it's not a sign that he's forgotten you, but that he's forming something in you that needs a little more time. That promotion might look shiny, but God sees how it could pull you away from your values. That relationship might seem perfect, but he knows what it would cost you behind closed doors. And that opportunity might make sense on paper, but God knows it would distract you from the path he's already prepared. It's hard to wait when you're watching other people walk into what you're praying for. But comparison will make you rush into something you weren't built to carry yet. You're not behind, you're being preserved. Because when God opens a door, he wants you strong enough to walk through it and stay. In the Bible, we are said that those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. Waiting isn't weakness, it's preparation in disguise. Rejection hits different when your heart was all in, when you showed up fully, gave it your best, believed with everything you had, only to hear a no, feel a silence, or watch someone choose something or someone else. It's hard not to take it personally, it's hard not to let it whisper lies to your worth. But what no one really tells you is that sometimes rejection isn't about your value at all. Sometimes it's the redirection you didn't know you needed. We tend to look at rejection as failure, as if God slammed a door because we weren't good enough to walk through it. But in the Bible, we are said that God's ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts higher than our thought. That means there's a version of the story we can't see, a reason beyond what we can understand. And just because something didn't work out the way you imagined, doesn't mean it wasn't working in your favor. There are doors you begged God to open that he had to lock because what was behind them would have broken you. There are people you prayed to keep that he had to remove because they would have drained your purpose. You thought you were being left behind when really you were being led forward. And the longer you sit in disappointment, the harder it becomes to recognize the gift hidden in the redirection. Jesus himself experienced rejection. He came to his own, and they didn't receive him. He was denied, misunderstood, cast out, and still, every rejection led him closer to fulfilling his calling. In the Bible, we are said that the stone the builders rejected became the cornerstone. That rejection didn't disqualify him, it positioned him. And the same can be true for you. Sometimes the heartbreak is what clears the path. Sometimes what you call a detour is actually divine strategy. And the people who couldn't see your worth weren't meant to shape your identity in the first place. When you're rejected, it's tempting to question everything about yourself, but don't let someone else's inability to receive you make you forget who sent you. Don't let a closed door convince you that the mission is off. It might just be that your assignment is shifting. In the Bible, we are said that all things work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. Not some things, all things. Even the no, even the heartbreak, even the silence. God doesn't waste anything, not even the things that hurt. That rejection might be the very thing that saves you from a future that doesn't fit who you're becoming. It might be the divine no that leads you to the right yes. So no, you're not being forgotten. You're being rerouted, not discarded, redirected. And where you're going will make sense of why that door had to close. There's a certain kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels heavy. It's the silence you get when you've prayed with everything in you and nothing moves. When you're seeking direction, but all you hear is the sound of your own thoughts echoing back. When you're showing up, doing all the right things, and yet the response from heaven feels like stillness. And in those moments, It's so easy to assume that silence means God has stepped away, but his silence doesn't mean his absence. Sometimes that quiet space is exactly where trust is built. We often crave God's voice because it makes us feel secure, but trust is grown when there's no obvious answer. That's the real test. Can you keep walking when you don't hear footsteps beside you? Can you obey even when the next step hasn't been explained? Because faith isn't proven in loud moments of clarity. It's revealed in the silent spaces where your only choice is to believe what he said before you stopped hearing him say more. In the Bible, we are said that blessed are those who believe without seeing. That's not just about physical sight. It's about spiritual certainty in the middle of silence. Abraham didn't get a daily update on God's promise. Joseph didn't get angelic reassurance while sitting in prison. Even Jesus, in his most human moment on the cross, cried out and was met with silence. But none of that meant God had left. Silence doesn't mean you're alone. Sometimes it's proof that the lesson is happening. God's silence is often the place where roots grow deep. It's the space where your faith starts separating from your feelings. Because feelings will tell you that nothing is happening. But faith knows something is always shifting behind the scenes. In the Bible, we are said to walk by faith, not by sight. That includes walking through seasons where the signs are few and the answers are delayed. That's not spiritual punishment, it's preparation. Think about the times you grew the most. It probably wasn't when everything was loud and obvious. It was when you had to decide if you really believed, even when the answers didn't come fast. When you had to choose to stay faithful, even when the emotions didn't match. That's where real trust is born. Not in the fireworks of answered prayer, but in the quiet resolve to keep going, even when God is silent. And maybe the silence isn't God withholding something from you. Maybe it's him building something in you. Maturity, endurance, deeper dependence. In the Bible, we are said that those who wait on the Lord will renew their strength. Waiting always comes with silence, but silence is not empty. It's sacred. It's where your character catches up with your calling. Just because you don't hear him doesn't mean he's not moving. Just because it feels quiet doesn't mean you've been forgotten. Sometimes the silence is his way of saying, I trust you to trust me now. So maybe the advice no one tells you is that God's plan rarely looks like your timeline, your expectations, or even your dreams, but it's always better. The delays aren't dead ends, the rejections aren't failures, the silence isn't abandonment. They're all pieces of a bigger picture you can't fully see yet. And the strength you're building in the wait, the faith you're developing through silence, the healing that comes after heartbreak, those are all part of your becoming. In the Bible, we are said to trust in the Lord with all our heart and lean not on our own understanding. You may not understand now, but trust will carry you where clarity cannot. Hold on to the quiet moments. Don't rush what God is writing, because one day the story will make sense and you'll realize he was with you the entire time, even in the parts where it felt like he wasn't.